let's get our next guest on. So, the intro. This gentleman has only gone and sold a former business to Palantir. Now, he's innovating in the world of robotics. And they just took some investment from Plural. Give it up for Salar Khafaji! Hello, my friend. Well, good to see you, man. Good to see you. Come in, come in.
Hi, Salar. How are you doing?
Hey. Here. Have a seat, have a seat.
I tried to bring some grapes, but they said no.
They're out of grapes.
I couldn't
Okay,
take them.
no worries,
Yeah.
no worries. Awesome. Salah, welcome.
Somebody ate
Look
them
at all
all.
of this. How cool is this? Have you seen this at a tech event
Amazing.
before?
This audience?
Well, have you? Yeah, specifically Mel Corker. Have you seen her before?
I have not.
Okay, but have you seen this kind of energy, this kind of stage, these kind of people?
I'm honestly I was talking to someone just before this. I'm actually blown away by Tallinn, like the whole ecosystem, the whole vibe. I was talking to a friend that I randomly walked into, and that this is the closest thing to like the Bay Area you can get in Europe, probably.
Really?
Yeah, for real.
What a compliment of
Yes,
Estonia.
yes.
Estonians, we raise your hands. Well done to
they?
you. Well
Yeah.
done to you.
Yeah.
First time here for you?
I've been here once before, just on a fun visit.
Okay, nice.
For
But I feel like congratulations are in order because your business, Monumental,
Yep.
just raised some money, did you not?
We
From
did.
Plural, 25 mil or so?
Yes.
Fantastic. Congrats. Give him a round of applause. That's it. I told you, we talk about money on the show. Now, your background being more in software, right?
Yes.
Formerly, why touch hardware? Why go into the world of construction? Like, where did that kind of beginning journey start with Monumental?
I think everyone who like goes to decide stupidly to start another business after doing it for the first time, you basically have to decide like, why are you doing this? And I think probably half the people I know are like, I'm going to do something similar to what I did before, and I'm going to do it like better.
Yeah.
And then the other half, which includes me, is like, I want to, for some reason, do something even harder. And I really wanted to do something more, in my view, at least like meaningful or impactful. At some level, honestly, I was just done with software. Like, I still love technology and software, but I wanted to like do something outside of the screen. And I got obsessed with construction for a bunch of reasons. Just like what was going on with it, the fact that not much was going on with it, basically, how important it was to society, how it's like a GDP level kind of like problem that not enough technologists like me are thinking about. So I just got excited to like try to do something in that space.
Where do you begin on the ideation process? Because I think many of us in this room, raise your hand if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a founder. This is the founders stage, and there's very few founders in this room. They're all with the investors, obviously. That's where they are. They're chasing down checks. But, you know, I'm always curious how someone decides to solve the problem they're solving, unless it's a doctor in healthcare, you know, which is kind of obvious or whatever. How did you begin? So, you know, you sold that company, you joined Palantir for a bit, right? Did the whole earn-out process. And did you start going, all right, you know, I want to find another hard problem to solve, like you mentioned? You know, do you go on hardproblems.com and it gives you a list of things to solve?
That would be a great website.
Hey, hardproblems.com, go create it.
This could be a very weird website, by the way.
Yeah.
But for me, like one thing that I actually like that was great about the Palantir experience was that the people who know Palantir like only know about the government side. Like that's kind of the notorious side of the company. But there's actually a very interesting kind of like part which I was involved with, which is kind of the commercial industrial world. So I actually saw how software got applied to like aircraft manufacturing, to like cars, to like the real world, except construction. Like that was very, very obvious. And I was personally interested in the space. I just started to talk to a lot of people. So I even actually didn't know what the world like. So I started talking to like real estate investors, construction people, like people on the ground, general contractors, and slowly started to figure out like what the problems were, how they worked, why previous technology attempts didn't really work, why they didn't like care about them, or so it's a bunch of those things. But honestly, initially, for example, I thought I was going to start like an infrastructure company. I thought I was going to build a company that will just like build autonomously build roads, which in hindsight didn't make sense, at least for me. Like I couldn't figure out how to do that.
You know, I know a business that's doing that called Carbon Crusher in Oslo. They're building these sort of, carbon neutral roads, and more on them later. So yeah, you started that process. Now, here's a question. So when I founded my last business, which is in the media space, I have, as many of us here, have learned lessons from that first time, especially since that was your first business, I guess.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. So first time founder woes. You make all the classic errors that we all keep repeating, despite people like Chris trying to help people with their pitches and presenting and things of that nature. Was there anything massive that you did differently that second time? Or is there anything, apart from the usual stuff, that would be interesting for us to learn? I have some sharings as well.
I think I would say, I don't think there's anything like completely different, but the two things is I became even more or really obsessed with team, like just hiring, how the amount of time I spend or we spend as a company on hiring really, I don't know what it is, but like might be like 5x more than it used to be. I remember when I was building my first company, people like investors or advisors or would tell me culture is really important. And then I'd be like, yes, culture is really important. And then I would like kind of nod. But honestly, I didn't really understand what it meant until maybe after a couple of years, the company grows. I saw like Palantir is actually a very cult-like company. Like they say that themselves, and that's in a positive way, right? Like they have a very strong culture. So I think those are the two things that I'm not doing differently. I just actually pay attention to them, spend a lot of more time on them.
So what is culture to you? I mean, how do you define that in your head? Because I kind of feel like it's slightly different variations of the same thing for everyone.
For me, it's this, like, what are the things where you don't need to think about a policy and everyone in the company will take the right decision without like a strategy or policy document? So it could be the smallest things. Someone in your team goes to travel. Are they going to ask you, can I book business or can I book this hotel? Or do they just know what the right decision is because you've just repeated stories, you've given them kind of the nuggets, and that's just like a tiny decision. But it's like, how many of those decisions will people be able to make on their own, aligned with the company values and goals, without you having to like write everything down in endless like documents or like
this
processes.
is the mission, vision, values, etc. Right,
Yep.
Chuck that down those roads. Because I think some of the guests we've had on the show right already. Tim, for example, I genuinely did meet their team yesterday morning before we started filming some shoots, right, Chris? And they all really, you could just sense, eat bread, slept, YOLO group, and they've been really a pleasure to work with, all very complimenting of each other and kind of creating this vibe. They're like, this is a nice place to work, right? And another entrepreneur I've spoke to many years ago who told me, I think, an interesting fact, which is, culture is how people speak about you in the business when you're not in the room. And ultimately how, they show up on a daily basis, right? And like you said, making the right choices and decisions. So now you're on your second journey, Monumental. We actually have a fun photo from the beginning days of Monumental. Stens, let's get that photo up. So, building hard. So this is the early days, right? Talk us through sort of, you wanted to solve a hard problem. Hardware is famously called hard. It's difficult, right? What was happening here? Because your robot, effectively, it was going to solve a problem of bricklaying, effectively, right? That's what you identified as the most manual element of something, which maybe should be the first thing to automate. Tell us a little bit about the early days. And I mean, you don't have a hardware background, do you?
I don't know. No, I studied physics. I've played around with hardware, but I'm not like a hardware engineer by any means.
What's interesting to me is, do you think that's actually an advantage or a disadvantage that you come more from the software side to the hardware side? Or is it like in some parts it helps you and in other parts it hurts you?
I think it's exactly that. So I do think having a technical kind of like brain or like wanting, like trying to absorb as much as you can is important if you don't have the background. I think the main thing we brought to the table, which time will tell, maybe we're idiots, we will figure out in a couple of years, is we're trying to apply a lot of software principles to hardware development. So like iteration speed, the way we prototype, which sometimes hardware people are like, that's not how hardware is done. And we're like, yeah, but we want to do it this way. That's like the whole point of this company. So that is something where that's really comes from us as like software people, I'd say.
So what are we looking at? When was this? How long is this ago? Because we'll see the finished product in a second. The robot, not finished product, but the robot today.
So this is roughly, this is less than 3 years ago because we started like about 3 years ago. So this picture is in our office, which was, I think this is like, I'd say November 2021. So like two and a half years ago. So what you see here is like we basically build our first prototype. It's not on wheels, like you'll see what it is like, but this thing doesn't move. It just can like it's basically like a cheap robot, which was the thing we wanted to prove. Can you build cheap hardware, cheap robots that you can control with software? You can see the very professional wiring done by initially me actually. I joke that at least in the learning phase, I only caused 2 fires. That's actually true. One thing that like you can buy this cheap aluminum profiles, which is mostly what you can see here. We need a counterweight. I didn't know how to build one, so we got this like PVC tube, literally just like for plumbing, and we just filled it with like a bottle of water, and then we filled that with lead balls. That's basically how we hack things together. Apparently, this is not how you're supposed to engineer things, but it worked for the prototype.
But maybe that's what helps.
Exactly.
It helps to not be from that field, and you just go like, oh, screw it. How can I solve this? And then it was maybe faster than an engineer would have done it.
You're just obsessed with just solving a problem. Like we actually didn't, we care, but like we didn't really care about how to do things. We just want to show there is a way to do this.
Yeah. There's a beautiful narrative on that, Chris. I think that's a fantastic point. Many of us in this room who wants to be an entrepreneur, be brave. Put that hand up. Who would like to create something? We got to sort of. Okay, fair enough, but that's fine. Being honest, appreciate you raising your hands. Juret, give him a round of applause for raising their hands. That's right. Because you don't necessarily have to be in the industry to create a solution like you did. Of course, you had other complementary skills, being an entrepreneur, the software side, raising money, having track record. But we need more people, and I think you touched on it earlier there about Elon Musk's big ask right now is to get more people who are smart, not going into law firms and finance firms and moving into entrepreneurship and solving problems in various verticals that they're not necessarily an expert in, finding and hiring the right people along the way. So let's just take a look at, obviously, that's what the product would have looked like if you were left to do it. Stens, let's get the video up of that, of the robot today. This is Amsterdam, I believe, right?
Yeah, this is Amsterdam. This is actually near the city center. So you can see our robots on the near to the building.
So this is the robot. You could do a little voiceover if we do this one. So talk us through the Salar. What's happening here?
So this is actually like the middle part is going to get dug out and become a canal. So this is actually a water retaining wall for a canal where you can see 2 systems working together. So we now have 3, like each system is 3 autonomous robots that work together. They supply bricks, supply mortar, and then actually build the wall autonomously. We still have people overseeing them. You can see them standing next to them, but that's kind of like the state of our fleet. This is from like roughly a month ago in Amsterdam.
That's fantastic. And the goal is what? So you just raised this large round now. What's that fueling? Where are we going with that?
I mean, obviously the goal is to like productize the scale of this, right? So like the way we see it is like, a year ago, this barely worked, like really barely worked. We were just like trying to do our first project ever. And now we're trying, we're going from like R&D first pilots to actual commercial revenue, figuring out like the operating model, the economics, and building more of these, right? That's actually the biggest like challenge or lesson in hardware. Like we can't just spin up more AWS instances. We actually have to make more of these for this thing to scale. And that is an art on its own where you need to learn how to like make them.
I think the question we all want to know is, have you programmed them to make cat calls, right? Isn't the
Yes.
bricklayers the ones that go, oh, darling? We saw that with your robot earlier. Starship's robot has music. And there's an obvious another use case, right, Chris?
Can I race it? Can I race the bricklaying robot? That was my first thought. No, but also I want to know, has Donald Trump already called? Because this sounds and looks
He'll
like
finally build the wall.
It's going to be amazing, right?
build a long wall.
We're going to build the best wall ever
That's
for him.
right
Yes.
up your wheelhouse with the robot.
I
Salar,
don't like bricks in the US, unfortunately.
maybe you're banned from the market. You have this audience here, right, Salar? You've done it. You've been there, done it. We've had Tim as well, who's still very much in that process. Jamie as well, building in that sphere. We've had some fantastic guests on the show today already. Tarvet, who's now giving back into the ecosystem. And tomorrow as well, we're going to have more guests. And we have an awesome guest to finish things off in just a minute. But first, I have you here. What would be your message to the audience here? Apart from the fact that Thailand's great. You're really enjoying it.
I'd say, entrepreneurship is hard anyways. I think a lot of people will say, don't start a hardware company, don't do hard tech. I actually think one of my biggest lessons is just do it. Like, it's already hard. It's maybe 10% harder, 20% harder, but you're already doing a hard thing. Try to really work on something meaningful and impactful to yourself, or join a company to learn if that's what you want to do.
I think that's a good point. Again, if you look at the journey Tarvet had with Skype, he was an employee first. We tend to look at entrepreneurs as they've always been an entrepreneur. They've only always been this kid selling lemons at school or whatever it might be. But in fact, and there's an argument to be made for every single aspect of that. Being an entrepreneur first, building, scaling, being an employee as well. Venus, we're going to have you first guest on the show tomorrow. Being an employee first through Bolt, growing with a startup and a scale up, and then evolving into that role, bringing different aspects into it. And I think that's a nice way to finish. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Give it up for Salar! Oh,
Thanks, guys.
Khafaji!
Thank you. Thanks.